You're on me?
Good evening, ladies and
Doing too
gentlemen.
much. I
Welcome.
mean, I do it
We're
louder.
about ready to get started. So take your time. Go ahead and start your conversation and socializing. But when you're ready, we'll go ahead.
Yes, I stand.
I did, and I still want you to. I mean, we're making a short conversation now. We're going to wrap it up.
Okay, folks.
Okay.
Hardcore.
Hello, and thank you very much for coming. This is our monthly meeting for Indivisible Sacramento, and as usual, I do see a few new faces, and I always want to give you the chance if you're new here, and if you want to just stand up and say who you are, and maybe what brought you here tonight. It would be great to hear from you. Is anybody interested? No? Okay. Would you like to say a word?
Hi, my name is Patty Gaynor, and I'm a disability advocate, and I'm here because I saw the ad in the Facebook page.
Great.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Patty.
coming.
See, Facebook isn't always evil. Sometimes it's
Hi, I'm Darlene Ruiz, and my friend Ginger and my husband John. I'm here representing BFD, Biddies Fighting for Decency. And we are a group of retiree women who are very concerned with what has happened, and we are a part of Indivisible.
Well, it's great to have all three of you here.
Hey.
Hi, my name is Benita Amaro. I am with a group called Abuelas Responden, Grannies Respond, and we help with the immigration, with the immigrants that come through Sacramento. I am here also because a good friend of mine, Jill, forwarded the Facebook invitation.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And Jill has told us about some of the work that you've done. If I remember,
Oh, thank you.
were you one of the sponsors of the hygiene kits drive?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Outstanding.
We've been
Organization?
Abuelas Responden, Grannies Respond.
Okay.
and if you watch the newsletter, we'll from time to time we hear about something that you're working on and try to pass the word on. So Abuelas Responden. Great. Well, thank you to everybody who came out. We've been doing this for almost 3 years now, since, as you know, the beginning of 2017. So I feel like we've got a handle on how things work and how the cycle of participation goes during the election cycle. In 2017, there was an initial surge of interest, and then as the summer dragged on, people had other things to do and got a little tired, so we had lower turnout in the summer. And then in the fall, people tend to get more excited, and it goes on and on, especially in a year where there aren't a lot of elections. So this is probably the lull right now before everybody gets really, really involved. And I gotta say, for all of you who showed up even during the lull, it's wonderful to have you here tonight. So, and I'm sure all these seats will be filled next year at this time, and we'll be raring to go to get this done. So Indivisible does kind of a lot of things these days. We've become a pretty big national organization and a force for progressive change and progressive policy. But our core mission has always been fighting back and opposing the Trump administration and everything that they stand for. And I gotta say, lately we've gotten some reminders about why we're doing that. From the completely absurd, like starting a fight with Denmark, to the the horrifying things that we hear about with his encouraging the white supremacists and all the just terrible policies that come out on a regular basis. And in fact, we got another reminder of that today with some of the changes that they're looking to make to immigration rules. One of our guests tonight was supposed to be Holly Cooper. She came and spoke to us last year, and she was an incredibly popular guest. And for anyone who came out specifically to see Holly tonight, I am very sorry. She had to cancel at the last minute. We don't know if this is actually the reason, but she's one of the attorneys working that's assigned to the Flores settlement. And as you may have heard today, the Trump administration just suddenly decided that they're going to just go ahead and ignore the Flores settlement. So I'm sure she's got a lot of work to do. But we still have a great guest tonight here to talk about immigration. So more on that in just a minute. One thing before we do get to our featured speaker, I wanted to show everybody this. This is a book Written, well, okay, that was a dumb thing to say. Obviously, it's a book. Our founders,
Pamphlet, really.
Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin, they're a married couple, used to be congressional staffers. They founded Indivisible back in the winter of 2016. They wrote a book, and it's coming out. I think it's available for pre-order right now, and it's going to be coming out. Is it in September?
Yeah, September, October, I think.
Okay, so just wanted to provide them a little bit of free publicity because they're great people and they've done a lot of good work and they're our leaders. So if we're lucky, they may be coming out to Sacramento for a book signing, and we'll be sure to let you all know about that. No, this is no. It's a thin book. A little bit more, no, actually, that's the same thing I asked when I saw it, and then several people have asked me. This is just a copy of the introduction. So if anyone, yeah, sure, you want to pass it around, feel free. So that's the introduction and forward. The real book, it will be big enough to be worth buying. So I've been told. I hope. I haven't seen how big it actually is, but. Yeah, so that should be coming out pretty soon. And not only that, we're going to try to see if we can get them to an event, but they're busy, so we'll see if we can. Okay, yes?
I hate to bring this up, but kind of on the same note, I know several months ago we kind of floated the idea of maybe getting
Rachel. Yes, and
yeah, if we sent postcards to her and said, come out to California and the Indivisible. Because I know she had a book signing recently, or she was out here for a talk, but she was in the Bay Area.
Well,
and
I would say that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. She has a book signing in October, and the tickets were gone in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have a big enough room for Rachel.
If Rachel Maddow or Ezra Levin or Leah Greenberg, if any of them come out here, we'll find a room. You did mention that to me, and I thought it was a good idea, writing some postcards. So I'll try to bring some postcards to the next meeting, so we can write to her. I'll have to find her address too, and see if we can do that. I did remember that. Thanks for the reminder. So with that, I'll segue on to our guest tonight. As I just mentioned earlier, the immigration issues are huge right now, and the humanitarian issues. And our guest tonight is one of the founders of NorCal Resist. Her name is Autumn Gonzalez.
Thank you for having us here today. Let me know if I'm kind of a low talker, so if you can't hear me, just wave at me so I know to raise my voice. And I'm going to ask Jill Schallenberger or Kellen or Benita if there's something I'm talking about that you have something to chime in on, please interrupt me. And if you have questions, also just please go ahead and interrupt me. I think it's always more interesting as a conversation rather than me just talking at you. So if you're not familiar with our group, we are similarly to Indivisible. We got together after the election. It was initially like a coalition of labor folks and community activists, community organizations of various kinds, wanting to create structures to protect our most vulnerable community members when this new administration came into office, knowing that immigrants were going to be big targets of that campaign of hate that was going to happen or had already been happening. The first thing we set about to do was to create a rapid response hotline. And there's some cards in the back. They've got a number on them. And this is basically a number that you can call. So if you went to the grocery store or you were driving past an apartment complex and you saw something that looked odd, unusual to you, like a lot of people dressed in black, standing around in a parking lot with unmarked vehicles, things like that, and you're like, that's different. You could call this number, and what happens is the number dispatches volunteers who are people like you and me, and those volunteers, if they're available, they get a text. If the volunteers are available, they go out to the site, they investigate, they start recording, they talk to folks who are like around to kind of piece together what's happening. And if it's an ICE action, then they connect the person who is impacted with resources. We have, as you know, Sacramento now has a small pool of money for deportation defense. So we have one attorney, maybe 1.5 attorneys, who do those cases for folks for free in our area. So it connects them to those resources. So it's a really great tool. We can always use more volunteers to be responders. So if that's something you all are interested in, we're having a training on the 29th at the Elk Grove Library to become a responder. And then we're having one on the 30th in Chico. The number goes basically all the way up, avoiding the Bay Area all the way up north. So it's a program we could really use more volunteers for. The second piece of the program is what we call accompaniment. So we realized that a lot of folks in our community are undocumented, right? They came here maybe on a tourist visa, or maybe some other kind of visa that they've overstayed, and ultimately that visa expired. There are some people who just crossed, in the desert, the things you kind of see on TV, but most people are here because they overstayed a visa. So the government knows they're here, right? They have that documentation, they know. So they have to go to the ICE office, which our ICE office is downtown on Capitol Mall, the federal building right there. Maybe you've been to a protest there. I'm sure some of you a few times. But they go there and they check in with the ICE office. And they basically just want to know, are you still living at that same address? Have you gotten into any trouble? These folks who didn't commit a crime were low priority for the Obama administration as far as deportation. So all they wanted to know was just, we just want to know where you are. That's it. But under the current administration, people go in and sometimes they go in for a regular check-in and they don't come out. That especially tends to happen for activists or people who are vocally against the administration. Maybe you saw the story about the young college student in, I think it was Bakersfield, who he read a poem against ICE at a public event, and then the next thing you know, he's put in detention, right? So they have targets, and usually the targets are people who they're trying to send a message to a community about, but sometimes it's just fear, just keeping everyone in a constant state of vigilance. So what our accompaniers do is they go with people to those check-ins, and they go and they make sure that A, that they come out, or B, if they don't come out, they can contact their families, they can mobilize our attorney process, our network of attorneys to find a person, and then we can start the process of hopefully getting them out. So that's another piece of volunteer work, and we also, besides our undocumented community, we've become a little bit of a hub for asylum seekers, and that's because we have a lot of really great resources in this area. We're in California, so we have pretty decent courts. We're in the 9th Circuit. It's just overall a pretty friendly, welcoming place for asylum seekers. So a bunch of organizations, if you've heard of RAICES in Texas, the ones that raise the $20 million in a minute, they recently placed a woman with us here in Sacramento because they heard this was a good place to place folks. But these asylum seekers, they don't have cars, they don't speak English, they don't know where anything is. One of the women, she just got here this week. So they need a lot of assistance from us. So Jill and Bonita and Kellen, they've been driving the women to their doctor's appointments, to lawyers' appointments, to anything you can think of, to buy groceries. They don't have any money, obviously. They don't have work authorization. So another way that the administration is attacking asylum seekers is by dragging out the process to get their work permit. So it used to be, it was 180 days, and then you could apply for your work authorization, and then you could go ahead and work. But now our asylum seekers that we're working with, they hit their 180 days, and they apply, and then they get rejected. And there's no explanation for why they're getting rejected, why the work permit is not being approved. And they get rejected again, they get rejected again. So they'll be here, over a year with no work authorizations. They have no way to support themselves, completely reliant on friends and family. And especially for the LGBTQ folks, they often don't have any family here in the United States at all. They don't know anybody, so they're totally reliant on small community organizations like NorCal Resist, on a church, if there's a church involved. They're really just at the mercy of us to come together and make sure that they don't end up homeless. So those are two of the pieces of work that we do.
Excuse
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
does your organization, or do you put people into training, especially retired lawyers?
So that's something we're working on. And I have a call this Friday with the San Francisco bar. We're talking about doing some kind of pro se asylum clinic. So hopefully soon. If you're interested in volunteering with us, learning about any of this stuff, we have a sign up sheet on that clipboard back there. So please sign up on that, because we are gonna, not shortly, but pretty soon be rolling out something for attorneys. Yeah. So
Because I understand from the state bar's perspective that even if you're not an active, you're an inactive retiree, that you can still practice so long as it's for a nonprofit.
I think that's right. And then the way these pro se asylum clinics are set up, a lot, like, you don't necessarily even need to be an attorney to participate. So there's ways, like, we can use the skills of attorneys, interpreters. If you speak Spanish, you're good at paperwork, you know, you have a job where you're familiar with filling out forms, those kinds of things. One of the other things we've been encountering in our community is that folks they're getting placed here as asylum seekers. They don't know anybody here, right? They don't know where to get an attorney, so they end up missing their dates. Like, there's certain dates you have to file things, there's certain appearances you have to make. A lot of these folks, like, they don't speak Spanish. They might speak an indigenous language from Guatemala. So if you hand them a bunch of forms in English, they're pretty lost. And I've seen a lot of people who are Spanish speaking and who should have under law been given documentation in Spanish. They have documentation in English. And I'm an attorney myself, and I can tell you, like, these documents are very hard to untangle, to understand what they're telling you to do. So there's no way folks can comply without the help of somebody who's, you know, sophisticated with this stuff. So what's happening is they are here, they've got papers, they're sent somewhere, and then they end up having a final order of deportation without ever having really participated in the process, because they're not being given really adequate instructions about what they need to do. So one of the other things we're trying to do, which is harder, is get the information out to the community generally by going to schools and churches and just flyering rural communities saying, like, hey, if you're an asylum seeker or if you're undocumented, like, these are the resources that we have for you, and you need to reach out. Because, I mean, we were just randomly at the ICE building for an event, and we found two families out front. One woman was crying because she had come in for what she thought was a check-in when she really actually missed an important court date, which was in LA, which it shouldn't have been in LA, it should have been up here. And she got in a final order of deportation, and they told her, you need to go home, pack your things, and be ready to go. And she had 3 small children here, and she was just in a complete panic. And then there was another family out front, similar situation, not knowing what to do, not understanding the process. So there's a lot of folks who are kind of living in the shadows right now that we might not be encountering in our daily lives, especially because they don't really have work authorization, so they're not at the places where we go, they're not working with us. You know, they're often kind of trapped in their homes, and they're victims to this very complicated system that does not need to be this complicated. So getting the word out to them is a big priority for us. And if you have ideas about doing that, the schools have been a great place. And just today we got a call from a school that had encountered a dad and his son who were in the same situation where they were asylum seekers. They've been here like 3 weeks and they have no idea what to do. So if you work in a school, I'd love to give you some information to take back to your school. But those are like 2 or 3 of the big programs that we do on a regular basis. We do those trainings on a regular basis, and we can always use more people, especially retired people who, if you are available to give people rides during the day, that's gold. Like, we need you. We also have a border trip program, and I think Jill and Kellen have been to the border trips. We go to San Diego. We also go to Tijuana. We have a group going in September. That group is mainly medical folks. but we're gonna do another trip coming up soon. That's not just gonna be like whoever wants to go, not only medical professionals. But as this Remain in Mexico policy continues to unfold, things are getting worse and worse in Tijuana, right? So people are living in tents. The last group we sent down, we sent 2 bike-powered washers and a bunch of tents and tarp, because people are living outside just in these makeshift, I mean, they call them shelters, but they're not anything we would call a shelter. They're really, really horrible, scary conditions, and there's little children, there's people who are disabled,
If someone goes to the board and you're not an attorney and you're not in the medical field, what would you do down there? What do you do?
That's a great question. So in San Diego, there's a lot of things that you can do, which might be making copies, it might be cleaning. I think Kellen cleaned like 90% of the time he was in the shelter. He was just keeping it sanitary, because there's every kind of communicable, illness going around, the flu, all kinds of stuff. TB, so there's keeping things sanitary is super important. Driving people to the hospital, one of the things that I did was the people that we met at the shelter had just been released by ICE, right? So they came to the border, they said, I'm here to declare asylum. They say, okay, and then they make you like take off almost all your clothes except for one layer, and then they throw you in this cold room. That's why it's called the ice boxes. They throw you in these cold little cells, keep you there for a while, and then maybe release you, maybe don't. And the folks who get released, and some of them, if they're lucky, end up in the shelter in San Diego that Jill and Kellen and I volunteered at. And that shelter, sometimes they get calls from like taxi drivers or folks like that who are like, hey, there's a group of migrants in this park at 2 a.m. who just got dropped off. There was a pregnant lady who got dropped off at a McDonald's. So folks who weren't doctors or lawyers were driving to go pick people up who got found on a sidewalk or at a McDonald's. I drove people to the hospital because one of the guys who just gotten released from detention, his collarbone was broken, and ICE had not given him any assistance. I had another very, very pregnant girl who was sick, and we didn't know what she had, but they had not given her any medical attention while she was in ICE custody either. So doing that is a big part of it. And Jill was gonna say something.
I was just gonna ask you that one of the big things that they do out of that shelter is, so that is kind of a hub. You have folks coming into the shelter who've just been released by CBP, and then they are, all their logistics and planning and a meal and shower and everything is handled at the shelter. Then they're off, they are headed to their next destination, which is where their sponsors or their families are. So they're either going by Greyhound bus, and if they're often met by abuelas around the country, or they're flying, and they always need drivers to take people to the airport or to the bus station. And it also for the airport, you can get, they have arranged it so that you can get a special pass so that a guide can actually go through security with the people they're bringing there, get them to the gate, and maybe even if you're lucky, find another Spanish speaker at the gate who's going on the same flight. You might be able to talk to them if they don't speak English.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways. You're gonna be, if you go to one of the shelters in San Diego or Texas, you're gonna be busy the whole time. They're definitely gonna keep you busy. In Tijuana, it's not as organized because these shelters are very makeshift, thrown together by caring community members. I'm assuming groups of people like this group right here down in Tijuana or in Texas. Some of them are church faith-based, a lot of Catholic charity work, and other denominations as well, Methodist, UCC. But they don't have the same resources, and so they're not as organized to take volunteers. So it's kind of more of a matter of plugging yourself into things that you can do, which might be the same stuff like cleaning, a lot of dropping donations, going to the Costco in Mexico. We prefer to take money down rather than taking a bunch of donations, although we try to do that too, because you can buy stuff in Tijuana and help the economy there. But you can figure out what are the needs of the shelter and go out and do a trip and buy them. Cook, a lot of cooking, things like that. There's also we work with it's basically a pro se asylum clinic. So even if you're not an attorney, they'll put you to work making copies, helping to keep the people in line moving and things like that. So there's other things like that to do as well. It's a little rougher around the edges in Tijuana because they don't have the kind of resources the shelters here in the U.S. have. But they're gonna need us more as long as this Remain in Mexico policy stays the policy. Those shelters are gonna keep getting more and more crowded as our shelters here become less and less crowded. And I don't know, Benita, like how the flow has been for the abuelas here in Sacramento.
It has decreased substantially.
Yeah.
I think we were averaging, once we started keeping track of the data, at least 100 a month on average. Last month, it was 63 or 65, and this includes adults and children. And we've never had it be that low before. And I know that Sherry and Kathy and I were talking. I went for several Sundays in August, and there was no one on Sunday morning. And last week, I helped a father and a young child, and it makes it worth it. At least you're helping someone. But now we would go most of the time anticipating that we would meet someone there to be able to help. And now it's hoping that there will be someone there. There's not always someone there anymore.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry,
that's-
where is there?
The Greyhound bus station,
Here in Sacramento?
yes. Because it's like Jill said, when they're down in San Diego or wherever it is, along the border, and their sponsor pays for them to come to them, they travel by Greyhound bus or by air or by train sometimes, I think. And so we see the ones that have come through Los Angeles and are going up to the Pacific Northwest, and they stop in Sacramento. We have maybe an hour with them. We have seen.
Is it necessary to be able to speak Spanish?
No. No, it's not.
How do you identify it?
It actually, once we found out, it was very easy. The people that come through are small, they're petite. They are just a very small, petite people, and they come through, and the big difference is you see everybody traveling, and they have luggage and backpacks and phones, whatever it is. They come through, and maybe they have a backpack that was given to them by someone at the border, but we have seen them just come in with a plastic grocery bag with all their worldly belongings in that little bag.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the reason we're always trying to raise money, and we've got a bunch of events on that flyer back there. We have a fundraiser this weekend at Two Rivers Cider, and it's because these families step off the bus with nothing, like literally nothing, and they've got to get their kids into school, and they've got to get an attorney, and they've got to do this, that, and the other, and everything costs money. And when you're starting at ground zero, I mean, it's really expensive. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of money to make that happen for folks. And we've been, like right now, we've been making sure all the kids have school supplies and clothes and all the things that you need to go to school nowadays, which is a lot of stuff. So that adds up pretty fast. And we have a donation drive going to, but yeah, the folks, they.
Does the money also pay for the vaccines for the kids so they can get into school?
We haven't been asked to pay for the vaccine. So because they're asylum seekers, they're here legally. They have a status of some kind, even though eventually they may not win the asylum case, in which case they'll be deported. But for now, they can apply for Medi-Cal. So we've been really lucky that for the most part, their medical bills, immunizations, and things like that have been covered. Although my understanding is that might be county by county, but we've had people in Yolo and here in Sacramento who have been able to get medical care.
How is that policy that they can't take any
So the
public assistance? And
So the thing with public charge is it doesn't apply to asylum seekers as far as we are currently being told by the attorneys we work with, but it's a fear factor, right? It's like really, it's making people not want to sign up for any kind of benefit. So we have one person who, she's won her asylum case, so at this point she's eligible for benefits because she's here legally now. But there's nervousness about, like, if I do that, am I going to be deported if I take advantage of that program? So it's, you know, it's just a really cool thing to do to people who have, like nothing. So that's really tough. Were you going to say something, Joel?
I was just on the subject of fundraising. This vet that is going to fundraise on our behalf and is going to donate all proceeds from dog clipping their nails. They'll be a they're in charge, and they're going to share the proceeds with NorCal Resist. And so I just wanted to say that not just to invite you guys to bring your dogs there, but because you guys have lots of creative ideas and you know people in the community, and there's crazy, wonderful stuff going on in terms of people having ideas for raising money. So if you ever, something comes to you and even if you think it's nuts, bring it. And we'll talk about it. It could be just wonderful.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So if you want to volunteer, sign up, or if you just want to know more, please sign up on our email list, or if you want to talk about a fundraising idea, we're always happy to do that. We have 3 women right now who need housing, and as you can, like, one of the things we were first doing when we started working with the asylum seekers was trying to find folks to house them, and it just became very apparent that with the very crunched housing situation here in Sacramento, not a lot of people have extra room in their house to house someone, even if they would like to do something like that. So we've kind of shifted gears on that, and we're looking more at churches and other institutional places that might have space to house someone. So if you have a connection to somewhere like that, a church that has like an empty property or a parsonage or something like that, that could be a great space for us to place some folks. There are a lot of people who are in detention right now, and because they don't have family and they don't have money, there's no one to get them out. So the people that Benita meets on the bus, they're lucky enough to have family here in the US who could pool together enough money to bond them out and then to put them on a bus. But if you don't have that, you can stay in ICE detention for 2 years, the whole pendency of your asylum claim. And it's really, really hard to win a claim from behind bars. It's hard for your attorney to communicate with you. It's hard to really prep somebody when they're in that kind of desperate situation. It's not the first thing on your mind. It just makes it very, very difficult for people to win their case. And I think that's another reason, that and the profit motive behind detention are the reasons that we see them doing that. We're lucky here in California that a lot of our detention centers have shut down, and now we only have the detention center in Yuba City, which is the county's jail, and then we have the YOLO Juvenile Center that houses not unaccompanied minors, but minors who've had some kind of brush or touch with law enforcement. So they're considered some kind of risk for flight, I guess, I don't know. But that contract appears to be probably ending soon. We do a program there, we do exercise with the kids. There are kids, and most of them are teenagers, but we've had some like little guys, which was, I mean, it really makes your stomach turn to see someone that small locked in a jail. So that's a really wrong thing that's still happening. It's still happening. Those kids are going to be moved, but they're going to be moved to somewhere else. So that's ending though, so that volunteer program is probably going to end too. But at the Yuba jail, Kellen goes and visits there, Jill goes and visits. If visiting is maybe too intense for you, you can write. I've sent books to people. A lot of folks who are in detention in Yuba, they are folks who have grown up in the United States. Like they came here when they were 5 or whatever, very young. They speak English. This is their home. It's a different situation from the asylum seekers, but a lot of them are very far from their families too. you would think that they would use Yuba to house folks who are from our area, but that's actually not what they do. We recently, well, maybe 6 or so months ago, had a young woman, maybe 19, get picked up by ICE in Roseville. She's from Roseville, that's where her family lives. And we're trying to figure out, like, where is she? Like, what do we do? And we located her, and she was in Virginia. Like, they had moved her across the country in a matter of, like, hours. So we had to pay bond to get her out, right? We had to raise the money for her bond and then pay the bond. And then we had to put her on a Greyhound because we couldn't afford to fly her. Yeah.
Generally speaking, what is that bond? How much is that?
So when we started doing this like 3 years ago, they were around 1,000, 1,500. And now it's not unusual to see on my Facebook feed people trying to raise money for $60,000, $70,000. Yeah, like almost impossible. And a lot of times those look to be some kind of reprisal for political activity. People who have been outspoken as undocumented folks.
Where does
Yeah.
that money go? Where that all that money?
It's very similar to bail. So at some point when the young woman from Roseville, when her case finishes, which it could be like 2 or 3 years or longer, we'll get the money back. So it goes into a pot and they're making interest off of it, I'm sure. But eventually it goes back. And bond is a pretty, almost everybody who has an immigration proceeding shows up for their court proceeding. And I think the only time that people really miss it is when they don't understand what's going on. Or they're told to appear somewhere like Our Lady, who was told to appear in LA, and there's no way she was going to get to LA if she even understood that that's what she was supposed to do that day. So I'd say ICE's errors are probably a big reason why if people aren't appearing. But for the most part, people want to do the right thing. They want to participate in the process, and they believe that a judge will give them a fair outcome. So they want to participate in that. Nobody wants to be living in the shadows and not able to participate fully in society, right? So that's how that process works. But I think what I was saying, I went off a track. We have 3 women who are looking for housing right now. So that's a big lift. So if you have a connection to a rental that you could maybe for a discount or for a short period make available, these are the kind of hurdles we're facing right now. We're just outright renting a room for one woman because we weren't able to find somewhere to place her. So this problem just keeps growing because they're not letting them work, because they're not issuing their work permits in a timely fashion. It's creating a pressure on all the nonprofits and groups like ours that are doing this stuff. And when we were down in San Diego and we were sitting there waiting, trying to find out when is ICE going to drop the people off here at the shelter and how many people is it going to be, and some nights it was 5 and some nights it's 200. And the director of the shelter one night was like, they're just trying to wear us down. You know, that this is just a game for them, and this is the way they operate. They're just trying to break us down. And I think all of these policies and the way they are doing this, they're trying to make people give up and just go back to their country of origin, which is, for some people, Kellen knows people that he's visited who they went back to their country of origin and they stepped off a plane and they were killed. It's not, for the asylum-seeking trans women that we work with, many of them have stories of being threatened by gangs, being injured, being raped, horrible, horrible things. Sending them back is more or less a death sentence, but that is the place where this administration is, and they're cool with that. And they would rather play these games and make this process as difficult as possible for the asylum seekers and for all the organizations that are working with them, rather than to let a few, this tiny number of people in the country who will do nothing but, add to, be positive in our community. It's really pretty disgusting. But I'm gonna stop there and see if folks have questions about anything. Yeah.
I know that the courts in this area, in California especially, are much more, attuned to the plight of the people. But when they're seeking asylum, what kind of documentation do they have to present to the court?
That's a great question.
Does it have to be in writing, or do they just take verbal?
It's a great question because, Benita was saying, people get off the bus and they have a plastic bag of stuff. So they're not bringing with them photos and police reports and things like that. So a lot of it is just your testimony of this happened, this happened, this happened, these people threatened my family, and you have to show credible fear. We are lucky because the women that we work with, the trans women, they all have very believable, credible stories, so it's very likely that they will be granted asylum. But I was talking to some attorneys in Atlanta this week who run this pro se clinic that I was mentioned a little bit, and they said one of the things they tell their volunteers is expect that everyone in the room will not win their asylum claim. So for the most of the population, those folks are not going to win it because they don't have, like, obviously when something traumatic happens to you, your instinct is not to like spill the whole story to a room of strangers. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it's uncomfortable, it's, you know, all of those things and more. So people say as little as possible, and then especially if you don't have an attorney who can tell you, no, you've got to like go there, you've got to tell the details. People don't do it, and then they lose their case. So, yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
So some people are granted asylum. Is that granted by a judge, and what happens afterwards?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have women right now who are, women and families who are in the asylum process right now. Right now they go to San Francisco to an immigration judge it's an administrative process, so it's not like a civil or a criminal court like we're used to, like the Superior Court. It's an administrative court. It's, I don't want to say it's more informal because this is a very complicated area of law, but it's just not the same level of process. So you have that step, and then the next appeal is the BIA, and then the next appeal is to like our federal courts. So it can take forever. Like Helen knows a bunch of people who are, 4 people who are at the Ninth Circuit.
It takes 4 years.
Oh, 4
to get
years
through the
to-
Ninth Circuit. So the guys
Yeah.
that visit will be locked up in prison for 4 years trying to find their deportation.
And then of course some of them end up appealing to the Supreme Court after that, but you're like almost never gonna get that to that level. So that's how the process works. We're lucky because in Sacramento we're gonna have a immigration court open next month. So our volunteers have been driving people all the way to San Francisco for these hearings and sticking with them all day and then bringing them back, and it's a long day. But soon we're gonna have it in Sacramento, and it's really, really helpful to have somebody like one of us who reads English and kind of can follow and understand. Sometimes you just gotta go in there and stand up with them and say, Your Honor, we are still looking for an attorney, can we have a continuance? Because your person might not know to say that, and they could end up losing their case right there, which is ridiculous, but that happens. But to have someone who's a citizen and who, you know, can speak out like that, you know, you're buying the person time. So that's gonna be a good opportunity for us to help more folks when that court opens here in Sacramento.
When is that expected?
Early September.
Great.
Yeah, so really soon. And those are open proceedings. Like any court proceeding is open to the public unless for some reason a judge has to close it. So I encourage you, once it opens, go down there and go in there and sit in on a day. There's gonna be 4 judges, and we should all like go and like meet, like watch these people and see what kind of courtroom they're running. And things run better when they're watched. So you being there will be helpful. Yeah, Doug?
We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
So a lot of the decisions made by the court will depend on the temperament of the judges that sit on the court. Do you have any background on the judges that are being appointed?
So these are, they're transferring from other places. So some of our local attorneys have encountered them, and I've heard that there's one that they like. And other than that, I don't know about the other 3, but I mean, that's positive that it's one that we like. And just in general, our California immigration judges are better than the judges like in the South and in Texas, yeah.
I would say that even that they're better. Out of the maybe 100 guys I visited, 3 have won their case. The rest have been deported or going to be deported. So they might be better, but it's
The
not
bar
like
is low.
winning. You know, high likelihood of winning.
Yeah.
It's not. And like she said, a lot of the guys I know go back to really rough situations, and some of them have been killed within a day of being out. So they do not care if you're likely to die. And in fact, they sort of encourage it. If they have any brush with the law or they're from a neighborhood that's a high propensity of gang involvement, they will give the documents to the country that they're being sent to the likely gang activity, as well as any Russian law they've had. So if you're going to a place that's somehow attached to a different cartel picks you up at the airport and kills you. And so I've talked to plenty of guys who've had that situation. They got disappeared within a day of being sent to Mexico, for instance.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and Jill is modeling one of our shirts, and we've got a lot of materials back there, so visit us at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Autumn. Our original plan was to have both Holly and Autumn here so that we'd see kind of different sides, with Holly talking about some of the legal aspects of what's going on, and then Autumn telling some of the stories of the volunteers doing the actual legwork. I think it was actually a lot more powerful just to have you up here by yourself, Autumn, so that was really good to hear from you. Thank you. We do have some other things to talk about because there are a lot of other important things going on as well right now. And our friend Phil Kim is here today. And Phil is with the California Nurses Association and also I believe the Wellstone Democrats. I'm not sure if he's representing either or both today, but he has an event to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. And I'm here. Thank you. I'm going to also pass these out. If you could take one and pass it, that'd be great. So yeah, my name's Phil. I work for the California Nurses Association, and I'm also an officer of the Wellstone Progressive Democrats of Sacramento. And I just wanted to announce an event here. But first I wanted to start by saying, with all this immigration work, and thank you Autumn and Kellen and Jill for doing this great work. And we all know this, the cruelty and the harshness of our immigration policy, that's the point of it. Not just as a so-called deterrent to immigration, but for political reasons. Trump is obviously using this to scapegoat and divide the country, scapegoat immigrants and minorities and divide the country. And that's his re-election plan. It's a little counterintuitive for good people like us who see that it's bad, but that's what he's doing. And I think it's important, I'm making a connection to healthcare here, that the way that we fight these fascist trends is by having a clear, progressive, pro-working class message that shows people that Democrats stand with working people in this country. And unfortunately, when you don't have that economic message for healthcare, for workers' rights, it's easy, unfortunately, for people to fall for that fascism and fall for that division. So on that note, there is a growing grassroots movement for healthcare justice. We have a broken and hugely expensive and highly inefficient healthcare system. You all know this. And so there is a growing movement for Medicare for all, improved Medicare for all. And as of a couple months ago, we now have a majority of House Democrats as co-sponsors of the Medicare for All bill. Oh, and we have some nurses here too. I just want to say that we, locally, Congresswoman Doris Matsui, unfortunately, is not one of those Democrats that's a co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill. And this is H.R. 1384. It's the House Medicare for All Act of 2019. And so for all of this year, we have been encouraging her to do the right thing. We've been canvassing. There's been over 100 phone calls to her office. We've been doing multiple events. We did a People's Assembly on Medicare for All a couple weeks ago that was well attended. And we've been meeting with her staff. Some of you were part of this, but we met with her staff a couple months ago, and they heard our stories. We had a lot of powerful stories. But unfortunately, she is not moving on the issue. And we asked for a meeting with the Congresswoman herself, because right now they're on a 6-week recess. And they wrote back and told us that she's too busy the entire 6-week recess to meet with us. She's not planning any town halls. And this is even though she has time to meet. She was recently at a PR event with Anthem Blue Cross, where they were celebrating the insurance company's donation of medical equipment to a local health center. And she was at recently an event at Frank Fat's. There was a restaurant anniversary that she was at. So she's out there in the community, but she doesn't want to meet with us. So what we're doing is we're going to her again. So next Tuesday, August 27th at noon, we will be rallying, as the flyer says, outside of her office. It'll be a short rally, and then we'll have a delegation to her office to encourage her to do the right thing, to join the majority of House Democrats by supporting Medicare for All. On the other side, there's a phone number. If you could place a phone call, you all know this. They log all the phone calls that are made to Congress. So please, if you can make a phone call, and if you can join us next Tuesday at noon, it'll be right outside our office in downtown Sacramento, across from the Amtrak station. that's basically it. Thank you. Uh-huh.
What's her reason for not supporting it? Yeah.
Well, this could be a longer discussion. I'll just say that a lot of some Democrats are focusing on more incremental steps of protecting the ACA, and they think that this is a distraction. And we think that you can do both. You can protect and shore up the ACA, but also fight for a real solution, because if you're not willing to challenge the insurance companies and the drug companies in a real way, then it's not a real solution. So, yeah, did you want to say something?
Well, I just had a comment for that. I think she's accepted tremendous amounts of contributions from insurance companies and healthcare corporations. Oh, I don't know.
They're up every 2 years, just like any member of the House of Representatives. And it's true, she has taken money from the insurance companies. You can look it up at opensecrets.org. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So it'd be really great if she could take all that money and then vote against them anyway, right? That's the deal. And I assume you're not doing an event for Ami Bera, Phil? Considering that one.
So, sorry, what was that?
Are you doing an event for Ami Bera too? Or?
Not at the moment, but he's actually a harder.
Slightly harder.
Good luck with that.
He's a more conservative Democrat, even though he's a doctor.
Right. So, thank you for telling us about that. We have another announcement here from Pat Ferris, who is our liaison to climate change issues, to Sacramento 350 specifically.
Thank you. Glad to see you all here. Glad to see that you've got fire in your belly and you're looking for co-conspirators and you're looking for ways to show up, and that's why I'm here. I've been coming for 2 or 3 years this whole time, and passionate about immigration. I was with Phil at Doris Matsui's office. I'm going to go to the rally, as we're calling it. And anybody who is passionately interested in healthcare, please come. About 6 to 9 months ago, I discovered that climate change was my major issue. And I discovered that because it affects all of us. And if we don't deal with it head on, at a deeper level than the administration certainly, but at a deeper level than most of the people who are committed to climate change, then we're really in bad shape. And it isn't just in the future, it's now. The Amazon has 2 weeks of fires that have been going on now. That's never happened at the Amazon before. The Arctic sea ice is melting. Much of it has melted. The Koch brothers are jubilant because that allows some ships to go through an area that never had access. So short-term financial gain for ecological loss. So the question that I've had intensely and more intensely is, what can I do about it? And what can any of us do about it? And I've got friends, and I've been one of them, who have a hard time getting up in the morning sometimes. And other times I just close off and I don't want to read any more climate news. And other times I think, now I gotta do something. I've got some friends who say, it's past the time we can do anything, because the forces are so intricately connected that have created an industrial revolution that has helped the United States to foster, to flourish, that to pull those apart is going to take too much energy, too much commitment. We don't have that commitment. We certainly don't have it collectively, and it's too intense. And I have other friends who say, oh, it's not as difficult as you make it seem, because there's going to be technological changes that come about that we don't even know about yet. I agree with the latter. There are going to be technological changes that we don't know about, but I'm not banking on that. So 6 to 9 months ago, I started exploring environmental groups and trying to find co-conspirators and asking people who are more technologically savvy and more technically savvy than I am and I'm coming up with some ideas and some thoughts, and finding people who are connected and who are finding points of effectiveness. Are they sufficient? I don't have a clue. But they're a place to begin and a place where there's possibilities and opportunities, and they're on the personal, individual level, they're on the family level, they're on the city and community and county level, they're on the state level and the national level. So I'm going to say just really quickly. So I'm on a project through 350.org, which is one of the seminal environmental and climate-oriented organizations nationally and internationally, but also here in Sacramento. So I'm on a decarbonization project, which is gobbledygook for how can we develop lifestyles and ways of being that are going to be most effective. And we're coming up with specific options and specific one-page sheets that we will have available on the 350.org website within the next month. And my role on the committee is to get rid of the gobbledygook and the acronyms and make it so that I can understand, and if I can understand, you can understand. So I'll come back and tell you when those are available and how to look at them, because everybody asks me, well, what can I do? Well, that'll be something you can do. Another thing is that 350.org is involved in climate action plan work. Now, by state law, every jurisdiction has to come up with climate action plans. What are we going to do to mitigate and to draw down carbon accumulation in the environment? What are we going to do collectively to reduce greenhouse gases? So they have to come up with climate action plans. Many jurisdictions are creating climate action plans just to comply and check off the box so that developers don't have to do individual climate action plans. So it's just a way to grease the skids for developers. That's what Sac County did. 8 years ago, they hired a consultant, the same consultant that San Diego County hired, and they created what looks on paper to be a good climate action plan, which said specifics of what the requirements were going to be for developers. Looks okay. 8 years later, they've done none of it. The good news is that San Diego County, who hired the same consultant, who helped them or provided the same plan for San Diego County, they got sued by Sierra Club. And the judge read the Riot Act to San Diego County. This happened 8 months ago. And there was an injunction, I believe that's the word, created so that no development can take place until they change their climate action plan, until they change their policies. So, given that, it's a precedent for Sacramento County. So we have a committee that's looking into legal ways that we can challenge Sacramento County. I will inform you of ways that we can get involved in that if you want. The other thing that I wanted to say is that there are 2 events. There's a Green New Deal event on September 28th. Green New Deal is a resolution which has the best language that I can see for climate mitigation. You can see the specifics about how to go to that event at the 350.org website. The other thing is I'm starting a study group. And this is the last thing, so I'll sit down. Starting a study group of people who are interested in finding out more about climate change, particularly how to talk about it, where the points of leverage are, and what we individually can do. I've got 8 people who have told me they're interested. I want 10, so I want 2 more. There's a write-up of it on that table. We're going to be meeting once a month. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that you may have heard of that was written and came out in the fall, which is a tremendous document based on solid science, calling out the risks and most of the climate articles that you're going to read, but I've never read it. I want to read it in the company of others who want to dig into it, want to read the UN report on biodiversity that says that if we continue on this current course, there's going to be thousands, if not millions, of species that are going to be extinct within the next 50 years. And a number of other seminal books to discover where the points of leverage are and how I can bring that on an individual level and on a local level and make a difference. If we don't make a difference with the climate, then we're going to have so many climate refugees. The refugee crisis that we see right now is going to be minuscule in relation to what we're going to have. My wife and I just went to Paradise a few weeks ago. We're going to have more paradises. So, anyway, if you're interested, my phone number and my address are up there. There's also a flyer from 350 that talks about the Climate Action Plan work. It's a good write-up, and it's got my contact info at the end. So if you're interested, I'd be glad to talk. I'd be delighted to talk to anybody.
And we have another speaker today that is our own Regina Banks, who went to an event in Washington, D.C. that she wants to talk about.
Good evening, everybody. I know I am what's standing between you and the parking lot, so I will be quick. So if you're like me, and when you started getting active with Indivisible, what you wanted was community and you wanted to feel like you weren't alone. Well, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, I had an opportunity to go to the Indivisible National Meeting in Washington, D.C.
Oh.
And you all are great, and I took a lot of strength from this room. But nationally, we are amazing. We have some real firebrands who are our leaders and our founders, and we've got a lot of really dedicated, intelligent, just driven people from all across the country, from literally from Alaska to Florida. Everywhere in between was there and represented, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to meet and connect. There are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight for you just so that you understand that the community that you're a part of, and let you know what's going on. Everything that I'm talking about are on multiple slideshows on the Indivisible National website. I encourage you to take a couple days, look at it, familiarize yourself with what's going on, because there are a lot of things happening, and this organization is going to have to soon and very soon start making some decisions about what things we are going to focus on. By all means, individually do what moves your heart, but this chapter is going to have to figure out which of these things we're going to be working on. To dovetail with what has been talked about in terms of immigration, I'll start at the end. We did an action at the Capitol and met with legislators. We had meetings with Feinstein and Harris, and I had a meeting with Ami Bera's office. That went about as well as you would expect it to go. But what we were advocating on is the Defund Hate initiatives, which is essentially another name for abolish ICE and basically starve the beast. And again, I encourage you to take a look at what the national website is saying. And I volunteered to go to Ami Bera's office here in town to reiterate how we feel about this. And there's a whole long list of issues. If you care, I will definitely put this up, but affordable high quality healthcare for all is number one, Phil, so there you go. But the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because it's one of the things that we've talked about in our meetings here, is the major structural thing that we're talking about in terms of saving democracy is ending the filibuster. So if any of you do not understand how problematic that filibuster is, really very quickly, this is not Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It is not somebody standing up reading the phone book for hours on end. This is one senator, and it doesn't even have to be, they don't even have to announce it on the floor. If Mitch McConnell hears from one of the senators, usually from his caucus, that they're going to threatening the filibuster, that's it. It's over. The entire House can pass whatever they want. One senator, one, can stop the entire process in its tracks. And right now that problem is Mitch McConnell, but it could be anybody. He's the focus of the ire, but it's a structural problem. And the filibuster as it exists today changed very recently, like 3 years ago or something. It is a rules change, not a constitutional change. All you need are 51 senators to say that we want to change the filibuster rule to something else, or abolish it, or make any other provisions that you want. So, best case scenario, we take the House and the Senate and the White House next year, and it doesn't matter whether the filibuster is there or not. Beautiful. But what if we take the House and the presidency and the Senate stays under Mitch McConnell?
Yep.
Cancel Christmas, it's all over. So nationally, one of the big things that they are working on, and it came up on several of our plenaries, was ending the filibuster. Who to target? Here in California, both of our, Dianne Feinstein is fine. Kamala Harris has said that she will abolish it if she needs to. She'll vote to abolish it if she needs to. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Somebody running for president should probably have an understanding of how to explain that. My views. But that's what's happening in Indivisible National. If you have any interest in knowing the actual paperwork, I've got the one copy that I brought home. I also just think it's a good idea for you to understand that this is the organization that we belong to. I mean, big and glossy. We're a little more casual here, but they did it up right, and we did it in style at the Capitol. You would have been incredibly proud of the work that was done, very professional, and really energetic. So if you know of somebody who would have enjoyed being here tonight, if somebody who would have, not that enjoyed is the wrong word, somebody who would have been edified by being here tonight, somebody who would have been inspired by being here tonight, please invite them, because we are a dynamic organization, and we are looking for that authentic diversity across age, class, all of those things that make us Americans and make us Californians. They are looking for us to be the leaders in the vanguard, and for a multitude of reasons. I was the one that was from Sacramento that came, and there's just so many more of us, and there's an opportunity for us to be engaged on that level. So I will be here, the paperwork is here, I've got the t-shirt you're gonna get sick of seeing me in. It was really a great opportunity. Thank you all very much for supporting me in doing that, and if you have any questions, let me know.
So tonight we talked about immigration, refugee crisis, healthcare, climate change, filibuster reform, and the direction of Indivisible. So whatever you're interested in, you know who to go see after the meeting to talk and continue the discussion. I'll just end by highlighting a couple events that we have coming up. First, we have a little flyer. I think it's the smallest flyer back there that's got our list of thank you. Upcoming Indivisible events. It's small print because we got a lot going on. So you can always visit our website at indivisiblesacramento.com, where Ellen painstakingly maintains a list of everything we got going on. We've got a postcard party that's next Wednesday, the 28th, at the library. Is it Colonial Heights Library next week at 7 o'clock. So you can write postcards to help throw Duncan Hunter out of office. He's the guy that committed a bunch of crimes and then blamed his wife for it, which is classy. I think he's still married somehow, and he's still in Congress.
Not for long.
So let's fix at least one of those things next year. Also, at 1 o'clock, pretty much every single Sunday from now until next November, there's a letter writing campaign at the Sacramento County Democratic headquarters. It's sponsored by our friends at Mighty Oaks. I believe they're sponsoring that, and you can just show up. It's 1033 S Street. Write letters, maybe socialize a little bit, and help flip some state legislature seats. Am I missing any big ones coming up, Ellen?
There's other things on the list, but those are
That's
those
good
are
for
those
now.
are the
Check
two
the
that I
website.
remember. So
Check the
there's
website.
more.
There's lots of stuff on there.
IndivisiBleSacramento.com. Anyone who's not on our mailing list too, we have a sign-up sheet back there, but you can also get on our mailing list by clicking the link on our website. So thanks everybody. It was oh yes.
Texting
yeah.
team, I wanted to give you an
Oh,
update.
yeah.
Oh great. I'm sorry. I should just ask for
Usually
it.
I get information. We did a whole big effort in Colorado to recruit people to run for Democratic positions and all levels of government, from, state, local, it doesn't matter.
Is that how you got Michael Bennett and Hickenlooper running for president?
We recruited over 2,200 people who have committed, and they're in process right now with the Democratic Party. So, yay for us. Okay. So you did any tricks, pat yourself on the back. And it's too bad that Olivia is not here, because she did a lot, and she was telling me how many yeses she got. So, and I could speak to that myself. So that's just the update on texting.
Thank
And
you so
if you're
much.
interested in
Great work,
texting,
Susan.
Call me.
Yeah, terrific work, Susan. You've really done a great job.
Thank
with
you.
that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great month, and we'll see you in the meantime.